Hi, Emily here. I'm an INFJ, and on one of my other videos, a commenter asked me a question, and they were wondering if I would share the nature and relationship of my introverted intuition and extroverted feeling functions. They were wondering what that would look like for an INFJ. And they were also wondering how this kind of played out in the whole alternate universe aspect. So I'd like to share my experience as an INFJ having introverted intuition and extroverted feeling and what that looks like. First, as an INFJ, my primary function is introverted intuition, or NI. INTJs also have this as their primary function. This function means I process data through impressions, possibilities, meanings. I soak in data more abstractly, and because this process is introverted for me, I tend to have the ability to grasp and sense patterns or probable plans that are laced in and through all of this data I've collected. Also, as I process, things tend to become more concrete, and I begin making connections, correlations, and I can even make some predictions. This function has been known to allow people to have a sense about the future and to process information that's usually hard to dissect or understand. I'm not psychic, but I do tend to see where something is going just through my in-depth intuitive observation and processing. Second, as an INFJ, my auxiliary function is FE, or extroverted feeling, and this function is the guiding function of my decision making. This is where my morals, values, ideals, goals, and perceptions all surround my intuition and thinking to filter it out and to help me decide what to do with all the data that I'm continually collecting. Extroverted feeling also helps me relate to and desire to relate with others through this filter of careful consideration for their feelings and needs. I find myself always considering adjusting my own behavior to suit the needs of someone else. I have to be careful not to do this at the expense of my own health or sanity, which I've compromised myself doing that many times in the past. But as you can imagine, being an extroverted feeler and an intuitive thinker, it makes for a really complex internal life. So I'll describe now a little the relationship between the introverted intuition and the extroverted feeling and how they play out together in me as an INFJ. I wrote up an example. This is all just like right off the top of my thoughts, but I wrote it down so that I would cover it all. So as an example, let's say I'm walking down the street and I see a lady walking a small dog. I perceive that the lady is kind of gruff and that her dog is somewhat anxious. I perceive the dog feels somewhat anxious because his owner is gruff. I start to wonder why the lady might be gruff and start to imagine what the dog's life might be like at home. Then all of a sudden the little doggy sniffs up to me and I scoop down and say hi, and the lady scolds the dog and I'm like, "Oh, it's okay, I love little dogs." And the lady shouts back, "He's a little beep 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 beep," and walks off. And then I'm left feeling like even heavier feelings. Now I find myself wanting to take the dog home with me and give it a good life, and to visit that lady and try and befriend her and find out what is under all of her layers of humanity and what's making her so hostile. Because I know her gruffness is a result of something internal, probably a way she was treated or something when she was younger. So yeah, that's an example of how my two functions play out in me. I will intuit data or another person's feelings like a water-starved fish, and then I'll process it through the filter of my values or feelings, and then from there I'll decide what I'm going to do with it. This all seems to happen simultaneously inside of me and can spin thoughts, feelings, opinions, and potential conclusions that are as diverse as the colors of the rainbow. Seriously, it's like crazy. So I'm often left stuck in a quandary of thought and emotion, and find I seldom make any sort of solid judgment about a situation or experience. As I reason, there are so many ways it could be interpreted or play out, and there are so many things it could possibly mean. So a lot of times I just let things just kind of hover. Yeah, I don't make a definitive judgment. So anyway, as far as all this having like a whole alternate universe aspect to it, I was thinking of commenting about it this way by saying I do believe there's an unseen world around me, and I would call that the spiritual world. And I do sometimes think that how I'm wired personality-wise does allow me to connect with it in especially rich and deep ways. As an INFJ, I have a heightened to hyper sense of awareness in general. And because I take in things through introverted intuition, I often collect data or feelings that may not be typically perceived by someone else. And then I think in some ways the introverted intuition and extroverted feeling relationship allows me better to like see the unseen world and to interact with it via my emotion, which can be a good thing and a not so good thing. Often strengths are double as our weaknesses, so I tend to be hyper vigilant about what I expose myself to or what I allow myself to be around, as my introverted intuition and extroverted feeling tend to be like a sponge, which I can never totally control or filter. So yeah, those are just my raw thoughts on this. It's the first time I really put all of this together. So it's kind of cool. Thank you, and if you have any more questions, feel free to ask.